All right. So I have a new setup. So if things get look a little weird, like they should like I'm off kilter or something, or my new microphone isn't coming through the way it should, please let me know. So, with that out of the way, let's get to today's video. So, you've probably heard that countries around the world are Trump-proofing their policies. Well, the White House is no different. They want to make it more difficult for Trump to say, use whatever regulations that Biden passes against the very people that were supposed to help them. So, let's go right to it. White House starts scrapping pending regulations on transgender athletes and student debt. Yeah, it looks like I'm going to have to figure out how to do this with a chat stand in front of my face. Oh yeah, this is not going to work at all. I'm going to have to figure this out. All right, President Joe Biden is abandoning his efforts to provide some protections for transgender student athletes and cancel student loans for more than 38 million Americans. The first steps in an administration-wide plan to jettison pending regulations to prevent President-elect Donald Trump from retooling them to achieve his own aims. The White House expects to pull back unfinished rules across several agencies if there isn't enough time to finalize them before Trump takes office. If the proposed regulations were left in their current state, the next administration would be able to rewrite them and advance its agenda more quickly. Even as the Biden administration moves to pull back the rules, it pushes ahead with cancellation through other avenues on Friday. The Education Department said it was clearing loans for another 55,000 borrowers who reached eligibility through a program known as Public Service Loan Forgiveness, which was created by Congress in 2007 and expanded by the Biden administration. As the pending Biden regulations are withdrawn, nothing prevents Trump from pursuing his own regulations on the same issues when he returns to the White House. But he would have to start from scratch in a process that can take months or even years. This isn't the way I wanted it to end, said Melissa Byrne, an activist who has pushed for student debt cancellation. Unfortunately, this is the most prudent action to take right now. She blamed Republicans for putting the Biden administration in this position. It's a bummer that we have a GOP that is committed to keeping working-class Americans in debt, Byrne said. The withdrawals are beginning as Washington braces for a potential government shutdown that could further complicate efforts by the Biden administration to tie up loose ends. In documents withdrawing the student loan proposals, the Education Department insisted it has the authority to cancel the debt, but sought focus on other priorities in the administration's final weeks. It said the administration would focus on helping borrowers get back on track with payments following the coronavirus pandemic, when payments were paused. The department at this time intends to commit its limited operational resources at helping at-risk borrowers return to repayment successes the agency wrote. Successfully. That's what happens when you have a stand in front of your face. For the regulation on transgender students, the department said it was withdrawing the proposal because of ongoing litigation over how Title IX, the landmark law preventing sex discrimination, should handle issues of gender identity. In addition, the department said there were 150,000 public comments with a range of feedback, including suggestions for modifications that needed to be considered. At this point, the department wrote, "We do not intend for a final rule to be issued." Caroline Leavitt, a spokesperson for Trump, accused the White House of adding more red tape and making it more difficult for him to govern. Right, because that's what Trump had every intention of doing. Governing. President Trump will not be deterred by their dirty tricks and will use every lever of power to reverse the damage Biden has done and implement his America First agenda, Leavitt said. Right. They're the ones who are doing dirty tricks. Sure. Kate Shaw, who served in the White House counsel's office under President Barack Obama, said it's not unusual for administrations to speed up or slow down rulemaking. It's more typical, she said, for the federal government to race to finalize regulations during a transition period, but that can be difficult when there's a time crunch. If you haven't started it early enough, you're not going to be able to wrap it up, she said. An administration official, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss internal deliberations, said the administration still supports the goals of its regulatory proposals. However, the process can be lengthy because it requires legal reviews and collecting input from the public. Federal agencies are now analyzing which rules to finish and which to pull back before the end of Biden's term, the official said. In recent years, presidents have tended to rely more on executive orders and federal regulations to sidestep gridlock in Congress. However, the rulemaking process can be less durable than legislation, leaving policies more vulnerable to shifts between administrations. Well, that explains why they're trying to Trump-proof this. There are dozens of other pending regulations across the Education Department and other agencies, ranging from relatively trivial updates to sweeping policies that carry weighty implications for the nation's schools and businesses. If a rule has already gone through a public feedback process under Biden, Trump could simply replace it with his own proposal and move straight to enacting the policy, effectively bypassing the comment period. I see. That explains why they're putting the kibosh on these regulations. So Trump would have to go through this period. The pair of student loan proposals expected to be withdrawn Friday represented Biden's second attempt at widespread debt cancellation after the Supreme Court rejected his first plan. One of them is a proposal from April that would have provided targeted debt relief to 30 million Americans. It laid out several categories of borrowers eligible for relief. Borrowers who saw their balances balloon because of interest would have to have had their accrued interest wiped away. Those who had been repaying loans for 20 or more years would have gotten their loans erased. That proposal was halted by a federal judge in September after Republicans-led states sued after it remained tangled in a legal battle. The second rule being withdrawn is a proposal in October that would have allowed the Education Department to cancel loans for people facing various kinds of hardships, including those struggling with steep medical bills or childcare. Senator Bill Casey, a Louisiana Republican, said Biden never had the authority to accomplish these plans. With today's latest withdrawal, they are admitting these schemes were nothing more than a dishonest attempt to buy votes by transferring debt onto taxpayers who never went to college or worked to pay off their loans, he said in a statement. Okay, now, before I continue, first off, Biden explained why he is canceling this debt, why he's canceling these regulations. He doesn't want to give Trump an easy way of changing things after the comment period to make life even worse. That's number one. But these Republicans, they don't care about actual reality and facts. Number two, these are the same people who would have no problems with the fact that people like Marjorie Taylor Greene had their PPP loans forgiven during the pandemic. And that was just peachy keen. Rich people can have their debt forgiven, but God forbid poor people get their debt forgiven. So yeah, he's basically a hypocrite. Although Biden did not achieve the sweeping loan cancellations that he initially promised, his administration has forgiven an unprecedented $180 billion in federal student loans through existing programs. Because of our actions, millions of people across the country now have the breathing room to start businesses, save for retirement, and pursue life plans they had put on hold because of the burden of student loan debt, Biden said in a statement. On Friday, officials announced they were erasing debt for another 55,000 workers, including teachers, nurses, and law enforcement officials, through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness. The program promises to cancel loans for borrowers who spend 10 years in government or nonprofit jobs. The $4.28 billion in relief is expected to be the final round of public service loan forgiveness before Biden leaves office in January. Biden's rule on transgender sports was proposed in 2023, but was delayed multiple times. It was supposed to be a follow-up to his broader rule extending civil rights protections to LGBTQ plus students under Title IX. The sports rule would have prevented schools from banning transgender athletes outright, while allowing limits for certain reasons. For example, if it was a matter of fairness in competition or to reduce injury risks, which is fair, totally fair, because depending on the situation that might come up. So, but it's not always going to be like that. So, nuance is good. It's great that they're admitting that there is nuance. As far as Republicans are concerned and other anti-trans people, there is no such thing as nuance. All trans people are bad, so Biden's proposal left both sides of the issue asking for more. Advocates for transgender athletes said it didn't go far enough in protecting transgender students from school policies that could unfairly exclude them. Opponents said it felt short of protecting girls and ensuring fairness. Okay, so, like I said, there is nuance. Now, granted, there could be schools who use that loophole, use that exception to try to prevent legit trans people from participating in sports because it's not that that exception. So I can see how it could be used against trans people. Absolutely. That's why I'm, iffy on, because the science is iffy on whether it there is any advantages to in certain trans people. But at the same time, there might be advantages. The problem is that Republicans and other anti trans people and organizations could still claim, oh, you're not being fair to me, you're not being fair to me. Whereas, you know, maybe, maybe, it's just simply that they don't think any, and this is obviously geared towards trans women. I'm sure that if there was a trans man in men's sports, no administrator would have a problem with that, because they assume that all trans women went through male puberty, so they are just naturally stronger, that they're naturally going to have an unfair advantage, which isn't a given. Now, my problem with the exception is just this, that okay, maybe it does confer some advantages, male puberty, but we're starting to live in an age where puberty blockers are a thing. So if trans women never went through male puberty, what's the problem? There isn't a problem. Trans women who never went through male puberty never went through those changes. So what's the problem? The reason I start questioning whether it does confer any long-term advantage, maybe in the short term it would, but long term I don't think it would, because if going on estrogen didn't do squat, then trans women would always look like men. And there are some trans women who look like men. And I put that in quotes because there are cis women who look like men. This idea that they look more manly, they look more masculine than your typical idea of what a woman looks like. So, because there are variations even among cis people. Not all men look like these macho men that people think, trans women look like, just put on a wig and ignore everything else. Maybe, pad your chest so it looks like you have boobs. I don't know what they think trans women actually look like. For the most part, if you were to see a trans woman, number one, I doubt any of these anti-trans people would recognize that they actually probably have used the bathroom, met them in the hall, met them on the street, played sports against them, because they look like women. There is no, aha, that's a trans person. That's not how this works. So that's my problem with even the exception. Sounds like it's being reasonable, but is it really? So that's number one. Now, as far as protecting girls and ensuring fairness, as far as the anti-trans folks see it, again, they don't see any trans person as being fair. And the fact that they talk about protecting girls and not protecting boys implies what they think of what trans women are. That somehow, even those who've never gone through male puberty, somehow they're just going to be naturally stronger than cis women, which is bizarre because you talk to a lot of trans women and they'll say that they're actually weaker than cis women because of how their bodies react to estrogen. I guess they don't because they I don't know if their adrenal glands produce as much testosterone in them as it would in a cis woman. I do not know if their adrenal glands would do that. So if that's the case, then they have less testosterone than cis women. So of course they're going to be weaker than cis women because that's where the strength comes in. Now, there are there strong trans women? Of course there are. Just like there are really strong cis women, and then there are cis women who probably couldn't find their way out of a wet paper bag. Because people are different. There are some who are very strong athletes and some who aren't. Same thing with men. There are trans men who are really strong and very athletic, and then there are trans men who have no interest in that. There are cis men who are athletic and strong and all that, and then there are cis men who are need help opening a jar, just like the stereotype of women that they need men to open jars. So, okay. The regulation sat on the back burner through the presidential campaign as the issue became a subject of Republican outrage. Trump campaigned on a promise to ban transgender athletes with a promise to keep men out of women's sports. And since there has never been men in women's sports, that's not a hard promise to keep because trans women are not men. Were they born male? Absolutely they were. They aren't denying that. That's why they're transitioning. But they are not men. Had Biden's proposal been finalized, it was certain to face legal challenges from conservatives who said Biden overstepped his authority. Biden's broader policy on Title IX, which was finalized in April, faced a barrage of legal challenges that prevented it from taking effect in 26 states. All right, so that is all I have for this article. And, yeah, it's just very annoying that people are so obsessed with trans women. Because I can assure you that let's talk about trans men for a second. These same people who want to protect women would insist that trans men play in women's sports, use the women's restrooms, use the women's locker rooms. I assure you, if most trans men were to do that, you would freak out that a man was invading women's spaces. And all they could say is, well, I'm just doing what you told me to. You said that trans women are men and trans men are women. So we're just doing what you said. Again, look up the instance of Mac Beggs. Mac Beggs was someone who was forced. Now, I don't know if this was high school or college. I think it was high school. Who was on testosterone, and he was forced to wrestle against girls because of the rule that said that you had to compete in the sport of your birth sex. So he did. He hated it. He wanted to wrestle the boys. He didn't want to wrestle girls. And of course he wiped the floor with the girls. But he took no pride in that. And now a lot of transphobes are using him as proof that this is what happens when you let men in women's sports, completely ignoring the fact that it was your policies that forced him to do it in the first place. Because that was not a trans woman. That was a trans man. And you forced him to compete against girls, so you kind of got what you asked for. Which kind of proves that they have absolutely no clue what they're talking about. That they have this idea of this being like bosom buddies. Just a couple of guys who are trying to, whether it be live in an apartment building or sneak into a all women's dorm or whatever, a la Porky's. And that it's pretty obvious that they're guys. I mean, obviously to the other members in the show, it's not obvious. But it is obvious to those of us who are watching. And so that's what people think of when they think of trans people. That it would be obvious to see, okay, this is an obvious man in a wig. Like I said, there are drag queens that you wouldn't figure out are drag queens. So, yeah, it's not that easy. Because again, there are cis women who look a bit more masculine or have lower voices. They're not trans. They just happen to be cis women who might have masculine features or have a lower voice than you would expect. So basically, if for no other reason, even if you seriously hate trans people, even if that were the case, think of what you're doing to cis people. You are basically putting cis people under a microscope, whether they're sufficiently a woman or sufficiently a man. So anyone who isn't your idea of a man or your idea of a woman, you're going to flag as trans and cause trouble for them, even though they're not trans. So you're not doing anybody any favors. And then, of course, there's the whole enforcement of it. How the hell would you enforce this? Now, when you talk to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, because at least I think Nancy Mace, who started this brouhaha in Congress, is that when asked how that would be enforced, they basically are like, well, duh, it's going to be easy. It's going to be obvious. We won't have to do genital checks. Because they have it in their mind, or at least they want those who are horribly transphobic to think of the fact that it's obvious who is a man, it's obvious who is a woman. And they don't want to point out, they don't want anyone to point out the obvious, that it's not that simple. Like, someone could flag me as being trans because I wear pants all the time. I wear jeans. Granted, they're black jeans, but they're still jeans. They're still denim. but I haven't worn a skirt in years. So if someone decides that that's enough to flag them, then how would I would have to get out my birth certificate and show that no, I was born female. Just because this person decided that they know what a woman should look like, they cause trouble. Same thing with a man. If there is a man who, I don't know, has long, beautiful hair, which you would think since the 70s happened and the 80s happened, where long hair on men was totally a thing, you would think that that would not be a tell. That wouldn't make people think, oh, you must be a woman. Well, there are still people who think that, and it's stupid. So, yeah, even if you don't want to admit that trans people exist, even if you don't want to, even if you want to hold on to this idea that trans people are just mentally ill or whatever the hell you use as a justification for your behavior, you're also hurting cis people. Because, like I said, cis people don't all fit into that neat little box that you want to put men in and women in. So, and that, we're not even talking about the rarities, like genetic rarities like XY females. I'm not even talking about that. I'm not talking about intersex. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about cis women, biological women who just happen to, whatever reason, have masculine features or dress more like a boy, like you expect a boy would, cut their hair a certain way, whatever it is. Or for boys to wear makeup or wear skirts. Whatever you have in your mind of what is a stereotypical man and what is a stereotypical woman, and you see someone who doesn't look like that, you're going to make a big deal of it because you're going to decide that this is not the way, this is not a man, this is not a woman. How about you mind your own damn business? I mean, hell, Caitlyn Jenner basically admitted, she implied, she didn't out and out say this, but she implied that she uses the women's restroom at Mar-a-Lago. She's used the women's restroom in Congress. And she is still very much trans. The only difference is that she is a Republican. So even Republicans aren't as anti-trans as you think they are. Well, maybe some are. But a lot of this is politics. A lot of this is them deciding, well, you know what? This is an issue that will trigger my base, so I'm going to go out and pound this issue so those people who know nothing about nothing will freak out and clutch their pearls and say, yeah, that's my scapegoat. That's the reason why my life sucks, because trans people exist, or or immigrants as well, but in this case we're talking about trans people. Or in the case of the debt relief, like I said, rich people have their PPP loans forgiven from when they got them under the pandemic. But somehow it's a bridge too far to let poor people get some relief. And if you say, well, I paid off my student loans, if you're, I don't know, my age, possibly older, definitely, the way student loans are, especially now, but probably also around my age because my sister-in-law had student loans. She the you're paying them off for a long time because they're predatory. So basically you're saying that before people even make money that they should be sucked dry because oh my god, they might get rich like me. Seriously, what is the logic behind that? So, yeah. So, yeah, Biden is trying to, since he knows that these processes will not end before that they won't pass before Trump takes office, he's just scrapping the whole process to prevent Trump from changing any regulations after the comment period. So then he ends up doing harm. So it sucks that these regulations were scrapped, but in the big picture, it's probably for the best. It wouldn't have gotten passed under Biden, and God knows what Trump would have done with them. So I believe that is all I have for this video. And with that, I will see you guys in the next one.